Okay, so this is part 2 of Corporatist Pride. Why are schools and companies making this sudden shift to the LGBTQIA plus agenda? Hey guys, my name is Jason Wesley, and this is not a podcast. So if you're coming here from part 1, I just finished talking about stakeholder capitalism and shareholder capitalism. There are 4 pillars to stakeholder capitalism. Number 1 is principles of governance. Number 2, planet. Number 3, people. And number 4, prosperity. There's also this thing called an ESG score that companies have been putting at the forefront of their businesses lately. ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. ESG investing refers to a set of standards for a company's behavior used by socially conscious investors to screen potential investments. Let's say your company has a low ESG. Well, these investment and management firms won't invest in your business. Now, that applied to the government looks like you don't want to do what we want. We just won't send you resources your way. Again, forcing behaviors. Under each pillar of stakeholder capitalism, there are several themes. The themes are where ESG measurements are applied and when taken together, produce an overall ESG result. So, for example, the themes for the planet pillar are climate change, nature loss, fresh water availability, air pollution, water pollution, and solid waste. All this is on the World Economic Forum website. You can read the breakdowns yourself. The conspiracy theory back when I was a kid was there's a bunch of elites that wanted to create this one world government and control all the people top down. There would be no religion and no freedom. Well, that's no longer a conspiracy. And apparently it never really was a conspiracy theory. It was real and no one wanted to believe it. It's just easier to keep your head down. Now, Visa is a pretty large company. Many of you guys watching this video probably have a Visa. Well, this is currently on their website. For annual programmatic and progress updates, please see our ESG resources page for our latest ESG report. Visa's climate commitment, carbon neutrality, net zero by 2040, and climate positive. Visa announces Visa Eco Benefits Sustainability Bundle to empower issuers to meet climate conscious consumer demand. Carbon footprint calculator. Insights offered by Ecolytic for cardholders into the estimated carbon footprint of their spend, including a new temperature score, which helps cardholders understand the climate impact of their personal spending behavior and how their consumption choices contribute to 1.5 degrees Celsius Paris Climate Change Agreement goal. You see how the Paris Climate Change Agreement standards were implemented, even though the United States pulled out of the Paris Climate Accords and then Biden put us back in, so now the U.S. taxpayers get to fund other nations with our tax dollars, even though nations like China that create the most pollution won't do anything.
China is responsible for about 55% of global carbon emissions, making it the world's biggest polluter.
In 2010, the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, released ISO 26000, a set of voluntary standards meant to help companies implement corporate social responsibility. Unlike other ISO standards, ISO 26000 provides guidance rather than requirements because the nature of CSR is more qualitative than quantitative and its standards cannot be certified. But CSR, corporate social responsibility, isn't something that's necessarily voluntary anymore. Leftists will tell you it's voluntary, but it's more forced behaviors, as Larry Fink described.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock, we are forcing behaviors.
At the WEF, Australian E-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman Grant tells the World Economic Forum we need a recalibration of freedom of speech.
We are finding ourselves in a place where we have increasing polarization everywhere, and everything feels binary when it doesn't need to be. So I think we're going to have to think about a recalibration of a whole range of human rights that are playing out online, from freedom of speech to the freedom to, to be free from online violence.
So you've got forced behaviors from ESG standards and the limiting of free speech in the name of some utopia that these elitists want. So Harvard Business Review published a study. How do consumers feel when companies get political? Now I'll leave this link to the entire article in the caption so you can read it on your own. But basically, when they ask Republicans and Democrats their opinion of a company based on whether it leans right or leans left on political issues, this is what they found. We expected to see some differences in how Democrats and Republicans reacted to political activity. Did one have a stronger reaction than the other? That a company engaged in conservative or liberal political activity did not affect Republicans' opinions of that company, but it did for Democrats. As previously reported, Democrats didn't care one way or another if a Jones Corp engaged in liberal activities. That means the 33% drop in opinion when Jones Corp engaged in a conservative agenda was entirely driven by participants who identified as Democrats. So it would stand to reason, in my opinion, that Democrats are much more likely to be judgmental and extremists than Republicans based on this study. Side note, what they do in China, the totalitarians in America will soon follow behind. Chinese government resumes removal of crosses from church buildings.
China and the Vatican are reportedly about to renew a historic deal. That's as a Chinese textbook has been found to paint Jesus as a murderer. In the original Bible story, a woman was about to be stoned for committing adultery, but Jesus stepped in, pardoning her sin and letting her go. But the Chinese textbook describes a different ending. It says when the crowd receded, Jesus stoned the woman to death, saying, "I too am a sinner." But if the law could only be executed by men without blemish, the law would be dead. The textbook is used by vocational school students. It teaches professional ethics and law and has been approved by a review committee under China's education ministry.
You don't think that'll happen in America? The 10 Commandments used to be in the classroom. Prayer used to happen every day at school. The Bible used to be taught in school. It's important to realize that Sunday schools were originally literally schools. They were places where poor children could learn to read. The Sunday school movement began in Britain in the 1780s. The Industrial Revolution had resulted in many children spending all week long working in factories. Christian philanthropists wanted to free these children from a life of illiteracy. Now this brings us to PGLE. What is PGLE, you may be asking? Well, it's a communist alliance between corporations and a globalist world regime, also known as the World Economic Forum.
So the PGLE, Partnership for Global LGBTI Equality, is in collaboration with the World Economic Forum. So this is a group that was formed in collaboration with the World Economic Forum after 5 or 6 years of working behind the scenes with senior leaders at just a handful of companies. This organization was founded in January of 2019. Can you believe that? The World Economic Forum just agreed to do it this January. So we have, they're in collaboration with them. We can use their channels of distribution, their brand. They're now in the mainstream, on the main stage in Davos and into the mainstream of the programming at the World Economic Forum. It's founded by 7 companies. We are signing on more. We want more. We have 14 now. But what are we committed to do? We are committed to change the world for LGBTI inclusion around the world, not by competing with other LGBTI organizations, but by amplifying and lifting, by using the platform of the World Economic Forum, both in Davos, but also regionally and around the world. Also working with the UN, trying to get these companies to, you have to have signed on to the UN standards in order to join the partnership.
How many companies have signed on to that now? A couple hundred, I think.
Yeah, 270.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. I knew we would know that. 270. Our goal is to get many, many more, and then to work around the world, both not only in sharing best practices among the companies, but their strength in numbers. So with the platform of the World Economic Forum, the power of the UN, and then finally the strength in the companies working together, where when you combine the economies, the corporate economies of those 14 countries, we're bigger than a lot of countries. So tremendous power.
That's why you're witnessing companies like Bud Light and Target actively supporting LGBTQ plus initiatives, much to their own detriment. This is a social credit system similar to China's that's now being implemented in America and backed by the World Economic Forum, where the CEO of Twitter is an active member. Beth Marciniak, board director and former vice chair, public policy at EY, which is an NGO, non-governmental organization, said in an interview that when she came out as gay in 2011 at 52 years old after being married to a man for over 13 years, and it was a cover.
So 8 years ago, very late in my career, I was 52 years old. Just thought my private life was my private life. Had been married for 13 years to a man, so I had the greatest cover in the world in my entire career, just say, I'm divorced.
She believes that if you're gay, then that's actually what makes you special.
The world is trying to make you feel like you don't belong, like you're less valuable just because you're gay. No, you are valuable because of that difference, not in spite of that difference. And EY welcomes that different perspective.
Now here's Beth talking about how Joe Biden met with them and told them that they can do things that government can't.
In Davos a couple of years ago, Vice President Biden met privately with those of us working behind the scenes, and he sat down with us and looked us in the eye, and he said, you companies can do what we government cannot and will never do. You have to change the world on this issue. So
now, what did Biden mean by that? Government can't violate any of our civil liberties. We have the freedom of movement, and we have the freedom to spend money how we see fit. But what if you have a visa that stops working just because you're going to go buy a gun, because that's what the government and these companies decide isn't in the greater good's best interest? Jason, it's a conspiracy. That'll never happen. Oh, really? Did you already forget about what happened to the truckers in Canada?
Information is now being shared by law enforcement with Canada's financial institutions. Financial service providers have already taken action based on that information. Since Monday's announcement, I've spoken directly with the heads of our major banks and with the director of FinTrack. My cabinet colleagues and I are meeting regularly, very regularly, including with the Commissioner of the RCMP, to discuss next steps. Our absolute priority is ending these illegal blockades and occupation. If your truck is being used in these protests, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. The consequences are real, and they will bite. It is time for you to go home.
Okay, so now there's this other organization called GLSEN, GLSEN, that calls for gender ideology to be integrated into all classes, even math. GLSEN used to stand for Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, but they just go by GLSEN now because the ideology says gender's a spectrum. And back in the 90s, when these gay and lesbian teachers got together, they didn't know about the spectrum and the plus that was added to the LGB, then it was LGBT, which was then changed to LGBTQ, and which was then changed to LGBTQI, which was then changed to LGBTQIA. And then they just kept adding so many letters. The leaders got tired and just added the plus at the end because they believe that there's an endless amount of genders, which is why Dave Chappelle refers to them as the alphabet community. They would have had to add a C and an F to the acronym due to the clowns and frogs, and the endless animal genders they just labeled as furries.
You're only going to use one pronoun set for me. Use they, them, or clown, clown, self. I don't want to be called she, her alone.
This is Cypress, and Clown mentioned not having people use clown or clown self pronouns for clown.
I am the local werewolf girl. I go,
Now, Target has been donating to GLSEN. This is on Target's website. Meet a few of our partners. We're proud to partner with GLSEN for more than a decade, working to ensure all students have a safe place to learn. Target annually supports GLSEN and its mission to create affirming, accessible, and anti-racist spaces for LGBTQIA+ students. And just like person of color means everyone other than white people, accessible and anti-racist spaces for LGBTQIA+ means anyone that's slightly right to the far extremist leftist ideology. Now, Target's been under fire because they put the gay and trans pride displays at the front of the Target stores where families walk in and promoted clothing for little boys to make it easy for them to tuck their penis if they feel like they're a girl. Over the last month or so since the incidents, Target stock has tanked at least 20%. And something even similar happened with Anheuser-Busch.
For more than 2 decades, Bud Light was America's top-selling beer before being dethroned by Modelo back in May. Now, this came after a boycott of Bud Light and its parent company, Anheuser-Busch, by some consumers. The controversy, I know you've heard all about it, began after trans social media star, that's Dylan Mulvaney, posted a video on Instagram, this was in April, showing the company had sent her personalized Bud Light cans. It was all part of an online promotion. Anheuser-Busch then faced more backlash for its handling of the boycott.
Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Dylan Mulvaney is a man that believes he's a woman and started cosplaying being a woman, calling it the Days of Girlhood on TikTok, and was eventually invited to the White House to interview the so-called president, Joe Biden, and then got ad deals from companies like Crest, Kate Spade, KitchenAid, Nike, Ulta Beauty, and Bud Light. And now Dylan Mulvaney apparently isn't a woman anymore and says that he's romantically interested in women.
So I recently told my parents that I may be a little bit romantically interested in women.
But of course you are.
And that was a big shock for them, considering the past 10 years of coming out as gay, then queer, then non-binary, then trans.
It's probably just hard for you because you're so full of shit.
And I think it was just a bit of a shock. So I tell my dad and he goes, well, I would love to see you get a woman pregnant. And I said, oh, no. She would be getting me pregnant. And then he said, what, do you have a vagina now? And I said, never say never.
Oh, man. Oh, God. Oh, man. Oh.
Well, maybe he considers himself a lesbian now. Who knows? Listen, he can identify as whatever he wants. Conservatives truly don't have any issue with that. Where we have an issue is when you want us to go along with the delusion. Listen, you can believe it.
and on all levels except physical, I am a wolf.
She, her, and clown, clown, self.
Okay.
My gender is...
I don't have to. Compelled speech isn't free speech. Lies come from compelled speech because you're never allowed to speak freely and tell the truth about what you believe. But isn't it so convenient that Dylan can get this money from idiots claiming that he's a gender that he isn't, but change it the next week to fit his feelings. And all those people that defended Dylan for being a woman can't be wrong. They will just go along with the ignorance to satisfy their own ego. So, just the other day, CNN had this major slip up by calling Dylan Mulvaney by the wrong pronoun.
They're not going to serve it because they don't like the way Dylan Mulvaney was treated after this whole controversy started. He, of course, is the transgender person they were going to sponsor and go along with Bud Light. They didn't like how Bud Light didn't stand by him after all this.
Did you catch it? You probably didn't if you're a sane person, but if you were actually thinking about it, you probably did catch it. Anyway, CNN had to come out with this apology.
We do want to make an important note. Yesterday in a segment about transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, who was featured in Bud Light's recent campaign, she was mistakenly referred to by the wrong pronoun. And CNN aims to honor individuals' ways of identifying themselves, and we apologize for that error.
Well, with many companies bending the knee to this woke ideology of gender mutilation and sexualization of children and promulgating that men can be women and women can be men, the Bud Light customer base decided that they would not spend their money buying Bud Light. And over the last month or so, Anheuser-Busch stock lost $27 billion. But the reason they even did it is twofold, in my opinion. Number one is because the VP of marketing they hired made a decision to do it in the name of inclusivity. Here's Alyssa Heiderschneid explaining herself.
So I had this super clear mandate. It's like we need to evolve and elevate this incredibly iconic brand. And what I brought to that was a belief in, okay, what does evolve and elevate mean? It means inclusivity. It means shifting the tone. It means having a campaign that's truly inclusive and feels lighter and brighter and different and appeals to women and to men. And representation is at sort of the heart of evolution. You've got to see people who reflect you in the work. And we had this hangover. I mean, Bud Light had been kind of a brand of fratty, kind of out of touch humor. And it was really important that we had another approach.
Well, she's on leave. Executives are on leave after Bud Light promotion with transgender influencer. Now, the second reason I believe that they did it is because of this ESG forced behavior. Along with Nike saying Colin Kaepernick was a hero for kneeling for the national anthem, they also gave Dylan Mulvaney a contract to promote women's sports bras. But Nike's gone all in though. This is an internal email talking about how they will now have a gender inclusive kids apparel line. This summer, Nike United Pride Network has the honor of once again spotlighting and celebrating the past, present, and future of our global LGBTQIA+ community. We are thrilled to have a phenomenal lineup of events and activities this June and July that will leave you inspired, invigorated, and immensely passionate about cultivating a better world for all athletes. Again, they say that they're not targeting children, but they're using the euphemism gender inclusive to promote a kids apparel line. Nike will feature Dr. Blair Peters of the Oregon Health and Science University for a July 11th panel discussion. Peters has publicly admitted to performing irreversible sex change operations referred to as gender-affirming top surgery on adolescent girls. Here's Dr. Blair Peters.
As like a teenager and young adult, I clung to the term gay because that's all I had, that's all I knew. But it never felt right. I never felt at home in that label. And it was over time as I started engaging more and more with the queer, trans, and gender diverse population that I really felt comfortable and started encountering people that looked like and felt like I felt, and learned the language that they used, and then really found the labels that I apply to myself, which are queer, gender diverse, and that's where I live. I'm Blair Peters. I use he, they pronouns. I'm a plastic and reconstructive surgeon at OHSU, and I specialize in gender affirming and peripheral nerve surgery. You know, I have an adolescent patient that hasn't been going to school for months and is completely socially isolated and is having just like an extremely difficult time, and they come back to clinic 2 months after top surgery and they're like this exuberant teenager in school, you know, planning the rest of their life, thriving all of a sudden. And there are so few things that you can do in medicine and in surgery where a few hours in the operating room can completely transform somebody.
The email also revealed that Nike has pledged $600,000 to various LGBTQ+ groups, including Camp Lightbulb, the National Center for Lesbian Rights, and Glisten. Louis Vuitton paid Jaden Smith, Will Smith's son, to wear women's clothing as a part of their male-identifying women's wear ambassador. Jaden Smith for Louis Vuitton, the new man in a skirt. Now, if you're using someone to market your male-identifying women's wear, why would you use an actual male? He's not an identifying male, he's just a male. You'd think that they would use somebody that's not a male. I don't know, like a female that identifies identifies as a male to wear the clothes, which would basically be a woman wearing women's clothing. Jaden says the reason he did it is this. So, in 5 years when a kid goes to school wearing a skirt, he won't get beat up and the kids won't get mad at him. Now, it's okay to treat people decently regardless of their sexual life, but I will not celebrate it, and you will not force me or coerce me to celebrate it either. It's sad that you're a female, that you believe that you're a male, and it's tragic that you're a female that believes that you're male. Should I always act upon my feelings? Is it denying myself to deny my feelings and act upon them? Where does it stop? What if I feel like committing a violent act on someone because that's a feeling I get? I can't control it. If you say that people can't control it and you should just give in to their physical and emotional desires or wants, what would stop someone from being a pedophile? Oh wait, we don't call them pedophiles anymore. They recently changed that to minor attracted persons, aka MAPS. But totalitarians don't care what dissenters think. They don't care about the science unless the science supports the Marxist ideology. Now, if you want to see a breakdown of Marxism and Leninism, go back and watch episode 13 called BLM, Marxism, and Peace. Emma Vigeland, who is a wild leftist, just says the quiet part out loud. She doesn't care about science. I'm right, you're wrong, shut up, you bigot.
You're correct that trans women should be able to compete in women's sports, but your argument for it is just scientifically and factually incorrect. I'm actually not bad about this. I'm 100% right on this. I don't give a shit about the scientific explanations. People, if they identify as a woman, get to compete in sports. If that's not fair in the short term for a variety of little competitions, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit, because the societal interest of including trans people in society trumps stupid competition. Full stop. So I'm right about this. You're wrong about this.
She's boiling over with pride, huh? 1 Peter 5:5-6 says, likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you be submissive to one another and be clothed with humility, for God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he will exalt you in due time. Now, if you don't want to do business with any of these companies that fall prey to the whole ideology, there's a new company out there called Public Square where you can find thousands of alternative places to shop. I highly recommend checking them out. Now, I'll leave you with the scripture for those of you that are weary in the fight, because it is exhausting. Galatians 6:9 says, do not grow weary in well-doing, for in due season you shall reap a harvest if you faint not. Now, there's a difference between being tired and being weary. Tired can be fixed by taking a nap or sleeping. Weariness can be fixed by time spent in prayer and fasting with God.